Idaho Territory. Spring of 1874, the wind carried the smell of pine and gunpowder through the charred remains of the Brody ranch. Keziah Brody stood barefoot in the blackened dirt, her dress torn and blood on her hands that wasn't hers. The barn was gone. The house collapsed half to ash. Her father's rifle, still clutched in her shaking hands, gave off a faint warmth from the last shot she had fired. Behind her lay two cold bodies, one of them her husband. No one spoke of how he hit her when no one was looking, or how he drank until his fingers twitched, how his breath turned sour and dangerous. But now he was dead, and according to the sheriff, so were her chances. They said no man would want her after what happened, the sheriff muttered to his deputy on the ride into town. Keziah heard that part. She also heard the boyish deputy say, "I would not go near her, not after what she did." She had not cried, not when they buried her husband, not when they cleaned up the blood, not when the townsfolk started whispering and crossing the road when she walked by. But she almost cried when they took her daughter away. The circuit judge ruled her unstable. "Trauma has taken her reason," he said. "A child must be raised in peace." Her daughter, Ada, was placed in the care of a preacher's wife 2 towns over. Keziah was told she could write, told she could visit once a month. But the looks they gave her said otherwise. They had taken her baby girl and handed her to strangers like she was something broken. She moved into a room above the old mill. The land her father worked was sold off in parcels to cover debts her husband left behind. Folks who used to nod her way now offered only silence. The women eyed her like a curse, the men like something dangerous. But every Sunday one man stood at the back of the church, arms folded, eyes fixed on her. He never said a word, never approached, just watched. And when the hymns ended and the congregation filed out, he stayed until she rose, tipped his hat, and walked out without a sound. His name was Porter Boyd. A cattleman from the Bitterroots, rode in once every few weeks for supplies, sometimes to trade horses, sometimes to help repair fences for the church or the schoolhouse. He was quiet, steady. People liked him, trusted him. When he spoke, it was plain and honest. Keziah had known him once when they were children, before her mother died, before everything changed. Back then, he had been her shadow on long summer days, the one who carved her name into a pine tree near the creek and told her he would marry her someday. She had laughed then. Now she did not laugh much at all. It was near dusk the next time he came to town. She was walking back from the general store with flour and coffee in a sack slung over one shoulder. The wind picked up dust along the main road, and she squinted against it just as a rider slowed beside her. "You should not be walking alone," Porter said, dismounting. "I am not a child," she answered, shifting the sack to her other arm. "No," he agreed, eyes steady on hers. "You are not." She looked away first. "I do not need help. I did not say you did. I do not want company. I did not offer company. I offered a ride." He said it so simply, with no trace of pity or challenge, that she hesitated. Then, slowly, she nodded. He helped her onto the horse, then swung up behind her, careful not to crowd her. They rode in silence through town, then past the fields that no longer belonged to her, until they stopped in front of the mill. She slid off. He handed down the sack. "I heard about Ada," he said. Her throat tightened. "She is safe. She should be with you." "That is not what the judge thought." "The judge does not know you." She looked up sharply. "Neither do you." "I do," he said. "I always did." She stepped back, heart pounding, not from fear but from something else. Something she had not felt in years. "You do not know what happened," she said. "I know your husband was cruel." Her lips parted. "You do not." "I saw the bruises, Keziah, years ago. You tried to hide them. You have always tried to protect people who did not deserve it." Her voice faltered. "Why are you saying this?" "Because," he said, Someone needs to stand beside you." She looked at him then. Really looked. His eyes were the same pale green they had been when he was 10 and swore he would never let anything bad happen to her. He had not been able to keep that promise. But now he was trying again. "I have nothing," she whispered. "I do not care," he said. "I have scars." "I know." "I lost everything, Porter." He stepped close, his voice low. "I have been waiting for you." She drew in a breath, sharp and quiet. "Why?" "Because I never stopped loving you." The weight of the years between them pressed in then, but it did not crush, it steadied. She could not speak. Not yet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a pine carving, the shape of a bird. The same kind he used to leave on her windowsill when they were children. "I made this for Ada," he said. "If you want to give it to her." She took it with shaking hands. He tipped his hat again. "I will be back in 2 days. If you want help getting her back." Then he turned and walked into the dusk, leaving her alone at the mill door, fingers tight around the carved bird, and her heart, after all this time, beating again. The bird sat on the narrow sill of her window, its wings tucked close, the carving soft from long handling. Keziah hadn't slept. She'd lain on the straw-stuffed mattress upstairs in the millroom, listening to the creak of beams and the river churning past the wheel below. Her fingers kept drifting to the bird without meaning to, tracing the shallow grooves Porter had cut with a careful blade. By first light, she had made up her mind. At the boarding stable, the liveryman gave her a sidelong glance but said nothing when she asked to rent a mare for the day. She paid in coin, not in words, and rode out east, keeping to the wagon ruts that curved toward the white chapel where Ada had been taken. The preacher's wife, Mrs. Harlan, answered the door with her hands in flour and a frown on her face. Her hair was pinned into a netted bun, her apron dusted white from the waist down. "She's not here," the woman said before Keziah had opened her mouth. "Where is she?" "She's out with my husband. He takes her on his calls to neighboring farms. Says it's good to have her see the Lord's work." Keziah stepped back, jaw tight. "You said I could visit." "I said once a month. This isn't your day." "She's my child." Mrs. Harlan's eyes narrowed. "And you lost her in a court of law. If you don't like how we run our house, take it up with someone who cares." Keziah turned before she said something she'd regret. She mounted the horse and rode until the fence lines gave way to open pasture. The wind pulled at her braid. She let it. She found Porter hammering a new gate hinge at the edge of a rail corral behind the church. He didn't look up when she stopped her horse, just drove the next nail in with one clean strike. "I want her back," she said. He hung the hammer on a peg and straightened. "I'll help you," he said. She dismounted. "How? You'll need a place that looks like a home, something clean, proper, not a room above a mill. Judge won't listen otherwise." "I don't have land." "I do." She stared at him. "You're offering I live with you." "No." He walked to a feed barrel, pulled out a ledger and flipped it open. "I'm offering you a job. I need someone to keep house. Cook, wash, see to the garden. Comes with a cabin on my land. 2 rooms, stove, clear water. You draw wages and you have a place fit for a child." Keziah folded her arms. "Folks'll talk. Let them. You're not afraid of them." "I'm afraid of losing what matters." The breeze moved between them, carrying the scent of hay and sun-warmed pine. She looked down at her boots, dust caked around the soles. "I've never taken charity. It's not charity, it's a fair trade. And if I say no, then I'll ride with you to any judge in the territory and speak plain about your character, but it'll be harder, you know it." She lifted her chin. "I'll work for you, but I won't owe you anything more than labor. You won't." "I mean it. I know." She nodded once. "When do I start?" "Now." The ride north took them 3 hours. His land lay near a fork in the Salmon River, tucked between forested hills and a stretch of open pasture. The cabin sat beneath a cottonwood, its porch swept, the roof patched with new shingles. A shed leaned behind it, smokehouse beside that. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and iron. A stove stood ready in the corner, a stack of wood next to it. The bed was made. A table set with 2 chairs waited beneath the window. "I cleared out the second room," Porter said, "for Ada if she comes." When, Keziah corrected, he met her eyes for the first time since they left town. When, he agreed, she unpacked her things in silence. A comb, a stitched handkerchief, a photograph of her daughter taken the day before the fire. She placed it on the windowsill beside the carved bird. That evening, Porter didn't come inside. She watched him from the porch, his figure dark against the fading sky as he walked the fence line with a lantern, checking for gaps. He moved like someone with purpose, not someone trying to impress. She boiled beans, sliced bread, and left his plate on the table. He came in after she had gone to bed, boots quiet on the floorboards, the chair scraping softly as he sat to eat. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But something in the stillness between them felt sure. 3 days passed before she said more than a few words. On the 4th, he came in with a gash on his arm from barbed wire. She cleaned it without flinching, wrapping the cloth tight. "You should be more careful," she muttered. "I was tired." "Then rest." "I will." She glanced at his face. "You always do what women tell you." "No," he said. "Only the ones I respect." Her hand stilled. He stood. "Thank you." She didn't move as he stepped out into the dusk again, but the place on her palm where his skin had brushed hers felt hot long after he was gone. Keziah rose before first light and stepped barefoot onto the packed earth outside the cabin, her breath curling in the cold. The river murmured just beyond the trees, and dew clung to the grass like fine lace. She let her shawl fall around her shoulders and stretched her arms, her muscles stiff from scrubbing the floorboards the day before. Inside, the coals still held their glow from the evening fire. She stirred them back to life and set water to boil, then pulled down the small tin of ground chicory Porter had brought back from town. She brewed it strong, poured 2 cups, and carried them to the porch. Porter was already saddling his gelding, the leather creaking under his hands. "I made this," she said, holding 1 cup out. He took it without a word, drank, then nodded once. "You always did like it bitter." "I like it plain," she said, sitting on the top step. "Tastes honest." He leaned against the hitching post and looked out toward the ridge, where a few deer moved slow through the mist. "Judge rides circuit through Red Saw Creek next week. I know a man there who can get us a hearing. Will they listen?" "They'll listen if we give them reason to." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "I was thinking about her drawing book. She left it behind. It's got a torn corner and 2 pages stuck together from when she spilled molasses on it. We'll get it to her. I don't want to visit, I want her home." He studied her face. "Then we show them homes ready." That evening she walked the fence line with him. He handed her a coil of twine without asking, and together they patched a sagging strand along the north side. The sun dropped behind the ridge, casting the pasture in long gold lines, and the horses grazed quietly near the creek. "You remember the Brackens?" Porter asked. "Used to live south of town, the ones with the twin boys. Those boys are grown now. One came back last week, said he's bought land near the canyons, looking for someone to help him build a house. Offered me coin if I'd lend a hand. You going to take it?" "I might. But I'd have to be gone 3 days." She tied the last knot and stood upright. "I can manage things here." He didn't question it. "I'll leave feed in the barn loft." They walked back in silence, boots soft in the grass. The smell of sage hung thick in the air. As they neared the porch, he paused. "There's a woman in town," he said slowly. "Name's Della. She asked me once to court her." Keziah stood still. I told her I wasn't able, he went on. Didn't feel right. Why are you telling me? Because you deserve to know no one's waiting on me but you. She turned, met his eyes. I don't expect a thing from you, she said. I know. Doesn't change what I feel. Her breath caught, but she didn't move. He tipped his hat. I'll be back before the week's out. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window in Ada's room, the carved bird resting between her palms. Outside, the sky was a field of stars, the moon sharp and high. She thought of her daughter's laugh, the way she had once clung to her skirts after nightmares. She thought of what Porter had said plain, without pressure, without expectation, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something close to steadiness. 2 mornings later, she rose early and borrowed the wagon Porter kept behind the barn. She hitched a mule and drove to the dry creek south of the ridge, where wildflowers grew in thick patches. She gathered armfuls of yellow blooms and purple thistles, then stopped at the edge of the wood where birch trees grew tall and slim. She cut 2 saplings and hauled them back. At home, she spent the heat of the day clearing brush beside the cabin, driving stakes into the ground, dragging stones to line a path from the porch to the new plot. By dusk, she had built a small garden bed, ringed it with rock, and planted seeds from the cloth bundle she'd kept hidden since Ada was born, her mother's heirloom beans, a few sprigs of mint, and a single rose cutting she'd nursed in a tin cup for years. When Porter returned, dust on his coat and lines of sweat on his brow, he halted at the sight. "You did all this?" he asked, voice low. "It's not much," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "But it's a start." He stepped down and walked the path, his gaze taking in the stones, the saplings, the small green shoots. "It's more than a start." She wiped her brow with the back of her wrist. "If they come and look, they'll see I'm not just hoping. I'm ready." He looked up at her then, something quiet and certain in his expression. "So am I." She didn't look away. "I know." Inside, she set the table for 2 without thinking. He brought in the last of the firewood, boots leaving prints across the floor she'd scrubbed clean. They ate in silence, but it wasn't empty. Afterward, he reached across the table and touched her hand just once, just enough. She let him. The knock came just after noon, light but certain, and Keziah wiped her hands on her apron before pulling the door open. A man in a dusted coat stood on the porch, a wide-brimmed hat in his hands and a folder tucked under one arm. His hair was graying at the temples, and he carried the look of someone who'd spent more time in courtrooms than barns. "You Keziah Brody?" "I am." He handed her a folded letter. "Name's Levy Orton. Judge McCall sent me ahead. He's agreed to review your case next week. I'm here to make a record of your current standing, proof of stability, readiness, that sort of thing." She stepped aside. "You want to come in, then?" He nodded and passed over the threshold, glancing once toward the open window where Ada's bed sat neatly made. She offered him a chair at the table, poured a cup of water from the crock. He didn't touch it. "You been here long?" 3 weeks. "You employed here?" "Yes. I keep the house, tend the garden, feed animals, cook, clean. I draw wages." "From Porter Boyd." She looked him full in the face. "He's outside, working the southern fence." Orton scribbled something with a short pencil, then looked around. "Child's room's in order, house is clean. You've got food stored in the root cellar. Want to see it?" He nodded once, and she led him out back. The cellar door groaned as she lifted it, but inside, the shelves were stacked with jars. Beans, dried apples, cornmeal in sacks. He made note of it all, said little. They returned to the porch just as Porter came up from the field, sleeves rolled, hat low over his brow. He gave a polite nod to the visitor, then looked to Keziah. "Trouble? No," Orton answered. "Just making a record." Porter glanced at her once, then shifted his weight. "If you need to know anything about her, you can ask me direct." Orton looked between them. You two married? No, she said before Porter could speak. But you share the ground. I work here. He pays me fair. Orton took that in, then flipped his folder shut. You'll want to be in Red Saw Creek by Wednesday. Judge'll expect you to speak for yourself. I will. He tipped his hat and stepped off the porch, walking back toward the narrow trail that led to the wagon road. Once he was out of earshot, Porter rubbed the back of his neck. You all right? He didn't ask about the fire. Or what happened before. Wouldn't matter if he had. You've made a life here. She leaned against the porch post. They'll want more than beans and a clean room. They'll want to see a mother who didn't give up, he said. She looked at him then, her voice steadier than she expected. You were there the day she was born. I remember. I was scared. My husband had gone off hunting and the labor came early. I was alone until you showed up. You were bent over a washtub when I got there. Refused to lie down. I thought if I kept working it wouldn't hurt so bad. He smiled just a little. Didn't work. No. She looked out toward the pasture. When they took her, I thought maybe I deserved it, for staying with him so long. For not leaving before things got bad. You did what you had to. I don't want her growing up thinking I didn't fight for her. She won't. I'll see to it. She turned back toward him. Why? Because I remember what you looked like when you held her for the first time. And because I saw what it cost you to let go. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. She stepped forward slowly. And if I get her back, what then? Porter didn't look away. Then we figure it out, together. Her hands twisted in the fabric of her apron. I'm not sure I know how to be with someone who doesn't need fixing. I'm not looking to be fixed, he said. I'm just here. Keziah swallowed hard. I never thought I'd have a quiet place again, or someone who saw me without flinching. You've got both now. She took a breath, deep and steady. I want her to know peace. I want her to grow up in a place where people don't raise their voices in the night. He stepped close, not touching, just near enough she could feel it. She will. The sun dipped low behind the ridge, casting the porch in warm light. She didn't pull away when his fingers brushed hers. She didn't speak when his hand settled gently over hers, steady as stone. And for the first time in a long, long time, she closed her eyes and believed it. The road to Red Saw Creek was narrow and rutted, winding through pine-shadowed hills and across two shallow fords. Keziah rode beside Porter in a borrowed wagon, the canvas top pulled tight against a gray morning sky. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers curled around Ada's drawing book, pressed flat and wrapped in linen. Porter held the reins lightly, watching the trail ahead without speaking. His rifle was strapped under the bench, just in reach, though the land was quiet this time of year. She wasn't sure if it was habit or protection he meant by it, but she didn't question it. Not now. The town appeared near midday, its low buildings banked by cottonwoods just budding green. They passed the smithy, the schoolhouse, and the still-shuttered Grange Hall before pulling up outside the courthouse. The bell hadn't rung yet. They were early. Inside, the air smelled of old varnish and wool coats. A clerk with a pale mustache directed them to a bench near the front. Keziah sat straight, her boots side by side, eyes fixed on the judge's chair. Porter remained standing, hat in hand, his thumb brushing the brim once before he stilled it. When Judge McCall entered, the room rose. He was older than she expected, his shoulders stooped with age but his eyes sharp beneath heavy lids. He settled behind the desk and motioned for them to begin. The hearing wasn't long. Mr. Orton stood, read from his notes, and handed over two affidavits, one from the schoolteacher back in town, the other from the circuit rider who'd stopped at Porter's ranch 2 weeks earlier. Keziah only spoke when asked. She answered clearly, her voice even, her back unbowed. She didn't mention the fire. She didn't need to. Her words stood on their own. When it was done, the judge leaned back, fingers steepled. "Is the child here?" A woman stood in the back, then the preacher's wife, Mrs. Harlan, dressed in a dark wool dress with her hands tight at her middle. Ada peeked from behind her skirts, one braid crooked and a scuff on her right shoe. Keziah didn't move, neither did the girl. Mrs. Harlan cleared her throat. "She's had a roof, meals, Sunday lessons." The judge nodded once. "And now she may have her mother." Keziah's breath caught. Ada stepped forward slowly, unsure. Keziah knelt where she was, not reaching, just waiting. The girl stared at her a moment longer, then walked into her arms. Outside, the sky had cleared. Porter helped Keziah lift Ada into the wagon, then climbed up beside them. The judge's words still echoed in her chest. "The child shall be returned into her mother's care, effective immediately, with no restrictions placed upon her movement or residence." They rode out slow. Keziah's arm around the small body nestled against her side. Ada dozed before they reached the first bend in the road. Her weight was warm and familiar, and Keziah couldn't stop watching her face. "You did it," Porter said quietly. "No," Keziah murmured, looking at him. "We did." That night, they reached home just as the wind picked up across the pasture, bending the grasses in silver waves. Keziah carried Ada inside, laid her in the bed they had prepared, and pulled the quilt up beneath her chin. She turned to find Porter standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the lamplight. "I was thinking," he said, voice low. "There's room at the north end of the barn. If we clear it out, we could build her a proper school corner. Let you teach her from home for a while." Keziah crossed the room and took his hand. "You think of things before I ask." "I've had time to think. A lot of it." She stepped in closer. "You said once you'd wait for me." "I did. I'm not asking you to wait anymore." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Then what are you asking?" She looked up at him, steady and sure. "Stay." He bent his head gently and kissed her, quiet and certain, like everything else he did. Her fingers curled into his shirt, and he held her close, as if he'd known all along they would come to this. They didn't speak again that night, not with words. But when the oil lamp burned low and the fire cracked soft in the grate, Keziah lay beside him with her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she slept without waking once. The seasons turned. Snow dusted the ridges by November, and Ada ran through it with a red scarf trailing behind her like a banner. Porter built a shelf for her books, then another for the jars Keziah filled with preserved currants and tiny onions she grew behind the cabin. The townfolk watched from a distance, but no one spoke against her now. Not after the preacher's wife returned the rest of Ada's things with quiet hands and downcast eyes. Not after Keziah began teaching letters to the younger children in the churchyard on Sundays. The land healed in small ways. So did she. One morning in early spring, with frost still silvering the fence rails, Porter came in carrying a box made of polished walnut. He set it on the table and opened the lid. Inside was a ring. Not new, but carefully made. "My mother left it," he said. "Always meant it for the woman I'd build a life with. I told her once it would be you." Keziah touched the band, then his face. "Then let's build it." They married under the cottonwood, Ada standing between them, holding both their hands. The preacher spoke soft, and the wind moved through the leaves above like a hymn. Afterward, Keziah hung the carved bird in the cabin window, where the sun caught its wings each morning. Their life wasn't grand, but it was solid. She rose each day to laughter and the scent of rising bread. Porter never missed a sunset without her, and Ada grew strong beneath their shared roof, her drawings pinned to the walls, her voice bright with the sound of home. And in all the quiet evenings that followed, when hands were held and nothing needed saying, Keziah knew. She had come through fire and silence and judgment, and found a love that didn't ask her to be anything but whole.